There you go. And
So
by the way,
is that your professional name?
Josh, yes.
No, the other one.
Josue?
Yeah, I can't.
No,
say
that's
that.
my Hispanic name.
Oh, okay.
Josh is my
So
white
that's your
name.
real
where I get
name?
money.
Okay, gotcha. I got it.
White people won't hire me unless it's Josh Abner.
really?
Oh, right on, yeah.
White people don't hire you unless your name is Josh. Like if they get scared off by Josue.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Seriously?
Yeah, I met my wife 16 years ago, and I sent in the resume as Josue this guy. Perfect for the job. They would not hire me, so I'm like, man, I got to modify my name. So I sent it in as Josh Abner, got hired the next day.
Get out of here. You're kidding me.
And that's where I met my wife.
No way.
So it's been Josh Abner the whole time.
No way. That's so funny.
Oh,
no way.
What do you do for a living? Because I see you on Twitter, and I know you like to give all the great friends your gambling advice.
Right.
And I know you've said for the last couple of years since I've been following you that you've been making people money with your gambling advice.
Always.
Okay? But that's not really your profession, is it?
No.
What is it you do?
Portfolio management is where it starts. Start doing financial stuff, make sure that the business is structured correctly.
What business?
And then it's, whatever business the person has. I had a great case of a restaurant here down in San Diego, and it was and I'm mentioning this because you made me money on this. I was listening on the radio. He was talking about Ishmael, the guy you played with, and he was getting letters from Jewish organizations, and they thought he was Jewish.
His name was Stephen Israel.
Right.
He was a black guy who came to me one day and said, hey, guess what? I made the Jewish All-American team. And they thought he was Jewish just because his name was Stephen Israel.
Israel.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, so he says, hey, why don't you go ahead and, process this company. Tell me what's going on with this company. I'm going to hire you as a consultant. And I'm driving on the 5. I shouldn't do this. I have my phone. I'm listening to you guys. And he sends me an email saying, hey, Josh, I don't know what to do. We're both Hebrews here. And my partner does not hire Gentiles.
Oh, no.
I hear your story. I email him back. Hey, my name is Josh Abner, for God's sake. Just tell him that. Yeah. And I got the job. I ended up making one of the biggest deals I ever had, like $300,000.
No way.
Yes.
Wow.
So thank you, Scott.
Way to go,
Where's my cut? I mean, Jesus,
Well, I'm
man.
doing everything
Jew
I
or
can for you,
Gentile?
man.
Go to Scott.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so enthusiastic about site and everything else, man, because I got to pay back. I got to pay back the shit.
I love it, man. So you made a $300,000 score on a deal. Like, what did you do for the company?
Well, what ended up happening, I processed things, and the one guy was stealing from the other guy. So I went in and hired a forensic accountant. I went and hired an attorney.
A forensic accountant.
That sounds pretty impressive, doesn't it?
Wow.
Wow, it sounds impressive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The word forensic in front of anything just makes you feel like that sounds
Absolutely.
like serious shit. Yeah.
So I set up teams for super rich people, and we execute. I'm kind of like the quarterback. We set it up like a football team, and we go ahead and we take care of business. It starts out portfolio management and ends up being Michael Cohen type stuff.
Nice.
Michael Cohen stuff, huh? Really? Is that when you going to jail sometime soon, pal?
I thought
No,
when
I
you
keep
said
everything legal.
Really?
I'm not like him.
I thought when you said execute that you take the guys out the back door and they don't get seen again.
So Josh,
Yes.
let me understand something. So 2 years ago, you're driving down the road. We're talking about the Chargers, and they've moved. And now we're going to cover the NFL a little bit differently. We're not going to be so Charger-centric. We came up with this concept. What if we took 32 listeners and we made each listener an individual team reporter? Because there's so much information out there that
Right.
anybody could do the job. I mean, you don't have to be an NFL insider. You just have to know where to go look for information. You joined the Great Friends Sports Network as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers reporter.
Right on.
Okay. Why did you take the Buccaneers?
Because I lived in Tampa for 20 years. And, and that's how it started. Started watching the games, and I'm like, you know what? I know what's going to happen next week, and I can make money doing it.
Nice.
So I started doing it, and, the Bucs are very predictable. Started expanding into, what was going to happen with other teams. I got a good percentage.
So you were not a gambler prior to this?
No.
You just started to realize that you could predict what the Buccaneers were going to do, and then once you figured that you'd predicted this, now you thought you could make money with it, so you started gambling for or against or some other combination related to the Buccaneers. Is that right?
Yeah, around 10 years ago, 10, 11 years ago.
Were you mostly betting against them? Were you betting with them? How were you?
It depends what it is, because it works like the stock market. You got to look at the market,
Yeah.
and you got to look at what's going on and how the coaches think, I remember old school. It just really started watching Billy Ray, but he was at Arkansas and Lou Holtz. And I remember.
Now, if you made money watching Lou and Billy Ray, then you owe us some.
No, well, Frank Wells would say, "Hey, you got a good kicking game and a good defense.
There you go.
All right,
You have
you're
to have a
gonna
good
win
defense.
75% of your games."
Right.
So I'm like, oh, okay. So now I'm like, oh, those games would go under. You know, people under the Broyles, Arkansas, Lou Holtz coaching tree, those games would go under. You're talking Louisiana Tech, where Lou Holtz's son plays. Same philosophy, you know, and you can just kind of see certain things coming.
So you
and monetize.
So you decided you're going to start gambling on football.
Right.
Now I know there was a stat earlier this week, and Alex, you'll have to check me on this. I think I read a stat that 15% of American males report that they will bet on football this year. Now, I don't think that means play fantasy football. I think that means bet on games. And now that gambling is legal in certain states and will soon be legal in many other states, including California,
Right.
more and more people seem to be interested in the gambling side of football. I will tell you, I never bet on football. I think I've told the story before. I was a freshman in college. There was a Monday night football game. The Bills were playing the Jets. The Bills were way favorites. Yeah, and again, I'm thinking it was the Bills-Jets, but the Bills were a huge favorite. Jim Kelly was the quarterback. This was the early 90s. This was Thurman Thomas and Bruce Smith and the whole legendary Marv Levy Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm in college, and I think, what do you mean? I know these
This
guys.
is a lock.
They're like a couple older guys. They're not football players. They're regular students, right? And they're from Philly, and they smoke weed, and they're cool, and they're like betting on football. So they go, yeah. They go, you want to bet on tonight's game? I'm like, how do I do it? And they're like, you know, you put 5 dimes, and I'll call my guy. I'm like, what? And so it sounded exciting, right? So I bet $50. I bet $50 on the Bills to win.
Not 5 dimes.
No, $50 on the Bills to win, cover the spread. Let's say it was 6 points, 5 points, whatever. And I mean, it was a sure lock. No problem. The Bills are going to win this game. The Bills are going to the Super Bowl. Jets are going nowhere. Easy money. I bet my $50, right? Game is played that night. Wouldn't you know it? The Bills lose. I owe $50 to the bookie. And I lost that bet. And this is a true story. I swear to you guys. In my life, 30 years ago, in my life, I've never bet a football game ever since.
Good
It
for you,
It was
man.
one of those negative experiences.
Yes.
Think about it the flip side, though. Like, had I won,
Right.
who knows how much of a gambler I might be.
Or how much
Well,
of a
you bet on the
billionaire.
horses, though, you know.
Well, and I do bet
That's
horses.
true.
I do.
Right.
But even in horse racing, I will tell you that you have to have a lot of discipline to bet horse racing. So for me, for example, this summer, I literally only bet, I'll bet you I made 5 or 6 bets, 10 to 12 the most. The whole summer long at Del Mar, call it 12 bets the whole year. Because I was mostly betting on my own horses, and I think I spent one day just sitting there playing the card.
I only put a bet when I'm at the track. I only put on a bet if I think the horse has a funny name or I see something before the race that would get me to bet the horse.
Right,
That's
right.
the only way I bet.
All right, so let me just say one real quick time out here with Josh Visquet, who is one of the longtime great friends sports network reporters, and I'm going to tell you why we invited Josh in here in 1 second. But let me have 1 minute to just talk about, and Emwell, if you can go to scottandbr.com, I want to just talk about Gary Cooper, Mountain Trust Mortgage and Realty Services, because as Gary always tells us, when you guys are on the air and you guys are telling people about Mountain Trust, the phones ring. When you guys are not on the air, the phones don't ring. So we're on today. Gary, get ready. We're telling people to call your office. Here's what I want people to do. Go to scottandbr.com, and you can find all the different platforms where you can watch or listen to the show. But if you scroll to the bottom of the page, you're going to see that we ask you to support our sponsors. One of those is Gary Cooper, Mountain Trust Mortgage and Realty Services. And so you click on that from scottandbr.com, and you come right here to the Mountain Trust Mortgage website. And Gary explains, we eliminate all the smoke and mirrors, all the shell games. We explain why when you call 5 different companies, you get 5 different answers regarding interest rates and closing costs. Look, the bottom line is, by the way, somebody's got rental.
And, you know, you games. So I like that to share with people. And, you know, you sit in Vegas sometimes and you feel bad for people who lose money. You know, there's a recession that might be coming on the way. And there's so many shysters, there's so many bad people out there getting bad information. And I have an opportunity and a platform to be able to help people, give them good information.
Don't you feel pressure
do
though? Don't you feel like let's say you put
Life
out
is pressure, man.
But don't let's say you put something out, right?
Right.
You put out something on Twitter, and I love that you sit there in your office and you've got your chalkboard. You know, your what do you call the it's not chalkboards anymore, but what do they call those things?
Whiteboard.
Whiteboard, you know, right? And so Josh sits there and he actually writes it all out for you, explains for you how to bet it. But how successful have you been? Because if you're under 50%,
Right.
and people take your advice, like for me, that would feel like I'm flying a plane and I got 150 people in the back and I don't know what I'm doing. What about for you? I mean, have you been really successful making your picks?
Absolutely. I mean, friends and even clients, they text me when they're in Vegas, Josh, give me 5 picks, right?
Yeah.
And I say, hey, out of the 5 picks, 3 to 4 are going to be right. I'm not going to get every one. Salesman thinks short term, businessman thinks long term. And higher level thinking is long term thinking, and I'm a long term thinking guy. Hell, I've been listening to you guys for more than a decade, more than 15 years.
Yeah, long-term thinking guy. Long-term. Okay,
know?
so you said a salesman thinks short-term.
Right.
A businessman thinks long-term.
Right.
And so at the beginning of the football season, right now, with tonight being the opening night, do you have like a dollar figure in mind where you say, I'm going to start the year off with $100, with $1,000, with $10,000, whatever it is. I'm going to start off with a number, and I'm going to show the great friends through the 17 weeks of the regular season my original bankroll versus what I end the season with. Are you planning on doing that?
Yeah, I've done it the last 2 years, and if somebody would have taken $10,000 when we started back a couple years ago and bet $10,000 on each of my picks, they would have $207,000. I had it on the whiteboard, you know, and I'll do a video with that.
Wow.
So if you would have bet $10,000, what do you mean? Like on each play?
On each play that I've given for the last 2 years.
$10,000 bet on every single play that you've given, you'd be up $200,000+.
Correct.
Okay. Let's be realistic here. Let's say the average person, the average great friend who's watching or listening right now says, okay, Josh, okay, smart guy, let me follow your picks. I'm not going to bet $10,000 a game, but I am willing to bet $20 a game.
Right.
Okay? But you're saying you're going to make us all money.
Absolutely, and I mentioned it on the podcast. It's all 25%. Like that bet you made $50. There's no such thing as a lock because you're not in the locker room. You don't know the players, right? Then there is no such thing. So you always bet just 25% of your bankroll. So you would have bet $10, and you would have still had 40 left to continue doing whatever.
Not bad.
Okay? So people are asking on YouTube, is this all documented, Josh?
It is. They can go to my Twitter page and see all the videos for the last 2 years.
Okay.
And start counting up.
Hey, I assume Alex is in the back now working
got the time.
with them. Well, can you guys pull up Josue's Vizquay's Twitter, because he does do this stuff. He really does put it out on Twitter, and he lets you see it for everybody gets to make their own picks here and decide if they want to put down their money. But you see, and we'll get this pulled up in a second, but you are now hosting, though, the Great Friends podcast.
Right.
And the Great Friends Sports Network podcast is a collection of guys who were reporters on teams. Here's Josue's, here's his page. Go to that video right there. Let's go to that video, which is right there. Yeah, go ahead and click on that. Let's take a listen to this. Let's see some of his work. Can you turn it up? What are you saying here? All right, here we go. All right, here's Josh Vizquay. He's got a sign that he's holding. It says $46,500. What does the rest of that say?
I'm breaking it down like I do for clients.
Okay.
So, I crossed out the client stuff and I put in the betting stuff.
Okay. And Josh is just holding up a whiteboard of how much money he's made for you.
Right, because that's the bottom line, is making money and then having fun watching the game.
Okay. But now all of these, all right, bring us,
And it's educational too.
and it is educational. So if you can, just go back to Josh's Twitter so that everybody who's watching or listening right now can follow along. I actually can't see from where I am his Twitter handle. Josh, what is it?
It is at Josue Vizquay.
Can you spell it?
JOSUEVIZCAY.
Okay, that's a pain in the ass. I always give you a hard time about that. We'll retweet some of this stuff. Okay, so now you've got the Great Friends Sports Network podcast, and I was listening to it on the way up here today, and I'm hearing Raider Jim Martinez, who's our Raiders reporter. I'm hearing a Dr. Steve Albrecht, who, by the way, lives in Missouri. He doesn't live in Southern California. He lives in Missouri. We're looking on the screen right now, by the way, of the Great Friends Sports Network NFL Betting and Team Report podcast, and we'll get a new logo up there that kind of represents the Great Friends Sports Network. But all of these reporters who were part of the show 2 years ago, who remained as loyal great friends to the show, they're now all getting their airtime on Josh's podcast. Bring it back in here, Amwell. Josh, how did you come up with this idea?
Well, it's not only, you give somebody a fish, but you got to teach them how to fish. Not only am I giving you a winner, I'm teaching you how to get a winner yourself, because it makes you feel better when you're in Vegas figuring it out yourself and going ahead and cashing the ticket. So these guys have been listening to me for 2 years. They've been sending me messages, sending thank you. Now, Raider Jim went to Vegas. He said, Josh, put together some picks. I went 10-2 for the man.
No way. You did? You went 10-2 for him?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, nice.
So he had a great time in Vegas. That's what it's about. It's about laughing, having a good time, and making people money, because there's only 4 ways to make money. And if you can figure out something to do, I grew up poor, you got to do it.
Okay, what are those 4 ways to make money?
Real estate, you got to get an inheritance, money from labor, and money from capital. That's the only 4 ways you can make money. So you cannot turn your way. You were in Arkansas. You cannot turn a blind eye to an ability to have a revenue stream, especially if you're watching sports. You maximize your time watching sports. If you can make money, your wife is happy. We talked on the podcast, gas money for the wife on picks.
Dude, so let me say this. If I took $1,000 at the beginning of the football season, and you had to say, okay, there's only 4 ways to make money, but you like watching football, and you're going to take $1,000, and this is your $1,000 bankroll for the season. What are we talking about here? I mean, what are we turning $1,000 into? 2, 3, 5, 10, 46,500? What are we turning $1,000 into?
You're going to make about 70% of the bets. If you listen to the podcast and apply the rules, you'll make 70% of your money.
Okay, 1,700.
But you're terrible at applying the rules.
I don't like the rules.
No,
Josh
you
was
don't.
saying. I like
You
the
can make
rules.
more than that.
He'll
if
argue with
focus.
you. He'll argue with the rules.
But the thing is, if we're wrong, we don't make money. So that's why I think our opinions is a lot more valuable than a lot of the guys out there. Because if we're wrong, our wife is mad at us. You know what I'm saying? We got less money in the bank, less buying power. And a few of the, Jefferson guys messaged me, hey, why don't we do a podcast? Why don't we do this and that? And I'm like, you know what? Why not?
It's a good idea.
Let's give people legitimate advice versus the crap that, they're getting out there.
I love it. Okay, so for those of you that are interested, and for those of you that want to get gambling advice from Josh, who says over the last 2 years, documented, if you'd have bet $10,000 on every single game that he would have given you, you'd be up $200,000+. So if you want Josh's gambling advice, and you want to hear from the other Great Friends Sports Network reporters that you got to know on the radio for all those years, and I hope all those great friends will spread the word to all of their friends, and I want thousands of people to be listening to your podcast, which I think will be really cool. And like I said, we're going to put it on our webpage, and then let's see how the season progresses.
And have fun watching games, seeing the craziness that happens and being able to monetize from it.
Well, the fun comes from winning. Right?
Well, once you get into that mindset of, okay, there's 10 games out of there, I'm going to win 7 of them. If you lose one game, big deal.
Big deal.
And something crazy happens at the end of the game and you lost, you're laughing. Because you know that you got profit built in.
Yeah, I mean, if you can go 70%, dude, that's incredible. Really is. Okay, Josh, before you go, let me just say I appreciate you very much, because I always like the fact that when you're making your videos, you're wearing your sided hat. And I'll tell you right now, I love what's going on. For those of you, Allison, maybe you can pull this up on the screen. For those of you that are watching and for those of you that are listening, I'll walk you through it. But if you're playing around this weekend, especially with lots of NFL content, the Great Friends Sports Network reporters all have their own side.